My parents gave my inheritance to my brother because he actually succeeded. Then their accountant saw my tax returns, went pale, and said, "Do they not know who you are?" The accountant's face went white when he looked up from the stack of papers. Gerald Whitmore had been doing my parents' taxes for 23 years, and I'd never seen him look rattled. His hand actually trembled as he set down the documents, his eyes moving from my tax return to my face, then back again. "Nathan," he said slowly, "does your family know what you do for a living?" I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "They know I work in tech. That's all they ever cared to ask." Gerald removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Your mother told me you were still figuring things out, that you'd never really found your path." He tapped the number at the bottom of my 1040. "This says you earned $2.3 million last year, before stock options." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, the ambient noise of grinding espresso and small talk fading into white noise. I'd come to Gerald because I needed someone who knew my family, someone who could help me understand what had just happened. What I hadn't expected was his reaction to learning who I actually was. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been sitting in my apartment in San Francisco, debugging a machine learning algorithm at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, when my phone rang. Mom's face lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer. Our conversations had become increasingly strained over the past 5 years, ever since I'd dropped out of the MBA program she'd chosen for me and disappeared into what she called that Silicon Valley nonsense. But something made me swipe to accept. "Nathan, honey, your father and I need to talk to you about something important," she said. No hello, no how are you, just straight to business, which meant this was serious. "We're updating our estate planning, and we wanted to let you know that we've decided to leave the bulk of our assets to your brother." I blinked at my monitor, the lines of code blurring. "I'm sorry, what?" "Now, before you get upset, hear us out. David has really made something of himself. He's a senior vice president at Merrill Lynch, he's got the house in Westchester, 3 kids in private school. He's proven he can handle responsibility." My mother's voice had that rehearsed quality that meant she'd practiced this speech. "And you, well, sweetheart, you're still finding yourself. We just don't think it would be responsible to leave you a large sum when you haven't really established yourself yet." I sat there, staring at my 3 monitors displaying the proprietary trading algorithm I'd built for one of the largest hedge funds in the world. The algorithm that had generated $340 million in revenue last quarter alone. "Mom, I'm doing fine. I don't need—" "We know you think you're doing fine, but your father and I worry. You dropped out of business school. You've never stayed at one job for more than a few years. You don't have a real career. David has stability. He has assets. He's responsible." She paused. "We're leaving you $50,000 in a trust fund. That should be enough to help you get on your feet if you finally decide to settle down and do something serious with your life." The number was laughable. I'd spent more than that on my car. But what made my chest tight wasn't the money. It was the dismissal. The absolute certainty in her voice that I was a failure, a disappointment, someone who needed to be managed and minimized. "Does David know about this?" I asked quietly. "Of course. He thinks it's very generous of us to leave you anything at all, given your track record." That's when something inside me shifted. Not broke. Broke implies something sudden and violent. This was more like a lock clicking open, a door I'd been holding shut finally swinging wide. I'd spent my entire childhood being compared to David. David, who got perfect grades without trying. David, who played varsity lacrosse. David, who got into Dartmouth early decision. David, who did everything exactly the way our parents wanted, like he was following a script they'd written before he was born. I'd tried to follow that script too at first. Got good grades, went to a respectable college, started the MBA program at Columbia. But somewhere in my second semester, sitting in a corporate finance class, I'd realized I was suffocating. The algorithms I was coding in my spare time were more interesting than anything I was learning in class. The startup guys I met at hackathons were building things that actually mattered, not just optimizing shareholder value for companies that would exist with or without them. So I'd left, dropped out 3 weeks before finals, moved to San Francisco with 2 suitcases and $8,000 in savings, and started applying to every tech company that would look at my resume. My parents had been furious, not disappointed, furious. My mother had actually cried, something I'd only seen her do twice before. My father hadn't spoken to me for 6 months. David had called to tell me I was being selfish and irresponsible, that I was breaking Mom and Dad's hearts, that I needed to grow up and stop chasing fantasies. But here's the thing about fantasies. Sometimes they come true. My first job was at a mid-tier startup doing data analysis for $75,000 a year. Barely enough to cover rent in the Bay Area, but I didn't care. I was learning, really learning, not just memorizing case studies. Within 8 months, I'd built a predictive model that increased user retention by 18%. The CEO noticed. When that startup got acquired by Google for $200 million, I got a retention package and stock options that vested over 4 years. I took the money and the experience and jumped to a smaller company, one that was doing something truly innovative with AI and financial modeling. That's where I met Richard Osman, a quant trader who'd left Renaissance Technologies to start his own fund. He saw what I was building and made me an offer. Come work for him as a quantitative researcher, help build trading algorithms, and take a percentage of the profits they generated. I was 26 years old. I said yes. 4 years later, I was pulling in more money than my father had made in his entire career as a commercial real estate attorney. But I never told my family. Why would I? Every time I called home, they asked the same questions. When are you going to go back to school? When are you going to get a real job? When are you going to stop wasting your potential? After a while, I just stopped trying to explain. I sent perfunctory emails on birthdays and holidays. I showed up for Christmas every few years. I kept my world separate from theirs, like two bubbles that could exist in parallel without ever touching. Until now. Until my mother's phone call, delivered with the casual certainty of someone who thought they were being generous. Leaving me $50,000 while my brother got everything else, the house in Connecticut, the investment portfolio, the life insurance, all of it, because I hadn't established myself. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark of my apartment, the glow of my monitors casting blue light across my face. Then I opened my laptop and sent an email to Gerald Whitmore. I'd met him exactly once, at my grandmother's funeral 4 years ago. He'd seemed kind, competent, the sort of person who actually listened when you talked. My email was simple. Gerald, this is Nathan Reeves. I need some advice about estate planning and family finances. Would you be willing to meet with me? I can come to Connecticut whenever works for you. He responded within 3 hours. Nathan, of course. I'm in Greenwich every Thursday and Friday. How about next week? We set up a time. I booked a flight. I didn't tell my parents I was coming. The coffee shop in Greenwich was the kind of place where hedge fund managers pretended to be normal people, ordering $8 lattes and working on their MacBooks like they weren't worth 9 figures. Gerald had suggested it because it was neutral territory, close to his office, but not in it. When I arrived, he was already there, a stack of folders on the table in front of him. He stood when he saw me, shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who took professionalism seriously. Nathan, it's good to see you. You look well. I'd dressed carefully for this meeting, not too casual, not too corporate. A button-down shirt, jeans, minimal accessories. I wanted to seem approachable, unremarkable. We sat down, and I explained the situation. My parents' decision, their reasoning, the phone call. Gerald listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me directly. Your parents asked me to draft the new trust documents last month, he said carefully. I've been their accountant for over 2 decades, so they trust my judgment on these matters. But I have to be honest with you. I was surprised by the disparity in the distribution. Did you ask them about it? I did. Your mother told me that you were still finding your footing, that you'd had trouble maintaining steady employment, that you'd dropped out of graduate school. She said David had proven himself financially responsible, and that they wanted to ensure the family assets went to someone who could manage them properly. I felt my jaw tighten. And you believe that? Gerald hesitated. I had no reason not to. You're not my client, Nathan. I don't have access to your financial information. All I knew was what your parents told me, that you work in tech, that you've changed jobs several times, that you never finished your MBA. He paused. But when you emailed me, I got curious. I did a little research. Nothing invasive, just the kind of surface-level digging any accountant would do. And I found very little. No LinkedIn profile, no obvious social media presence, nothing that would indicate what you actually do. I keep a low profile, I said. My work is sensitive. I assumed as much, which is why I'm asking directly. Nathan, what do you do for a living? I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were copies of my last 3 years of tax returns, redacted to remove anything proprietary but showing the bottom line. I slid them across the table. Gerald opened the folder. That's when his face went white. That's when his hand trembled. That's when he said, "Do they not know who you are?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment. No, I said finally. They don't. And until 3 weeks ago, I didn't think it mattered. Gerald was still staring at the tax returns. Nathan, according to this, you're in the top 0.1% of earners in the United States. You made more money last year than your father has made in the last decade combined. I'm aware. And your parents think you're unemployed? Not unemployed, just unsuccessful, directionless, not living up to my potential. I could hear the bitterness in my own voice. Gerald closed the folder and removed his glasses, cleaning them with a cloth from his pocket. It was a delaying tactic, I realized. He was trying to process this. Why didn't you tell them? He asked finally. It was the same question I'd been asking myself for 3 weeks. At first, I didn't tell them because I was still proving myself. I didn't want to brag about a good year or a lucky break, only to have it fall apart. Then I didn't tell them because they'd already decided I was a failure, and I was tired of trying to change their minds. And then, I trailed off. Then it became easier to just let them think what they wanted to think. Gerald nodded slowly. I understand that impulse. But Nathan, your parents are about to make a significant legal and financial decision based on completely inaccurate information. That's not just unfair to you, it's a disservice to them. They deserve to make this choice with all the facts. Do they? The question came out sharper than I intended. They've spent 32 years deciding who I am without bothering to ask. They've compared me to David at every turn, found me wanting, and written me off. Maybe this is exactly the choice they deserve to make. Gerald was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your brother knows, doesn't he?" The question caught me off guard. Knows what? That your parents are leaving everything to him. Your mother said he thought it was generous to leave you anything at all. That means they discussed it with him. They brought him into the conversation. I hadn't thought about that. Hadn't let myself think about it. But Gerald was right. Of course they'd told David. Of course they'd gotten his blessing. He was the golden child, the success story, the one who'd done everything right. Yeah, I said quietly. He knows. And he didn't object. He didn't say, "Wait, that doesn't seem fair to my brother." He agreed that you didn't deserve an equal share. Gerald's voice was gentle, but the words hit like a punch to the gut. "He's always been the favorite," I said. "This is just making it official. Nathan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Gerald leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. "Do you want to tell your parents the truth? Or did you come here hoping I would do it for you?" The question hung between us. I took a sip of my coffee, which had gone cold. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants them to know, wants to see their faces when they realize how wrong they were. But another part of me," I trailed off, "doesn't want to give them the satisfaction," Gerald finished. "Doesn't want to seem like you're trying to prove something, or like you care what they think." "Exactly." Gerald tapped his pen against his legal pad. "Here's what I can tell you from a professional standpoint. Your parents have asked me to draft estate documents that will distribute approximately $4.8 million in assets. The bulk of that, about $4.5 million, is designated for David and his family. You're allocated $50,000 in a restricted trust. These documents aren't finalized yet. I still need both of your parents to sign them in front of a notary, and that's scheduled for next month. So there's still time to change their minds," I said, "if that's what you want. But Nathan, I have to be honest with you. I don't think showing them your tax returns is going to solve the underlying problem." "What do you mean?" "The problem isn't that they don't know how much money you make. The problem is that they've decided who you are, and they're not interested in evidence that contradicts that decision. If you walk in there with your tax returns, what do you think happens? They're shocked, maybe. Maybe they apologize. Maybe they change the will. But do you think it changes how they see you? Do you think it makes them respect the choices you've made? Or does it just confuse them? Make them wonder why you didn't tell them sooner?" I sat back in my chair. He was right, and I hated that he was right. "So what do I do?" "That depends on what you want. Do you want their money? Do you want their approval? Do you want revenge? Do you want peace? Those are 4 very different goals, and they require 4 very different strategies." I thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't want their money," I said slowly. "I don't need it. And honestly, the idea of inheriting from them makes me feel sick right now." "Okay, what about their approval?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I spent 25 years trying to get their approval. I'm done. Revenge?" I was quiet for a moment. "I want them to know they were wrong. I want them to understand that they spent 3 decades underestimating me, and that they're about to make the biggest mistake of their lives based on assumptions that were never true." Gerald nodded. "And peace?" "I don't think I can have peace with them. Not anymore. They've made it clear where I stand in their priorities. I'm the backup plan, the disappointment, the kid who didn't turn out right. I can accept that. But I'm not going to pretend it doesn't hurt, and I'm not going to make it easy for them." "Fair enough," Gerald said. He pulled out a fresh piece of paper and started writing. "Here's what I suggest. I'm going to delay the signing of the estate documents. I'll tell your parents that I need to review some tax implications, which is true. There are ways to structure the trust that could save them a significant amount in estate taxes. While I'm doing that, you're going to decide exactly how you want to handle this. And when you're ready, you're going to tell me, and I'll help you execute your plan." "You'd do that? Even though they're your clients?" Gerald looked at me over his glasses. "Nathan, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen a lot of families make a lot of bad decisions based on pride, on assumptions, on old grudges. Your parents are about to cut their son out of their will because they don't understand who he is. That's not just a financial mistake. It's a moral one. So yes, I'll help you. Not because I want to hurt your parents, but because I think they deserve to make this decision with all the facts. And frankly, because I think you deserve better than what you're getting." I felt something loosen in my chest, something I didn't realize I'd been holding tight. "Thank you," I said quietly. Gerald smiled. "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get messy." He had no idea how right he was. I flew back to San Francisco that afternoon, my mind spinning. Gerald had bought me time, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do with it. Tell my parents the truth? Let them sign the documents and cut me off completely? Find some middle ground? I spent the next 3 days working like a demon, throwing myself into my algorithms and my code, trying to drown out the noise in my head. But on the fourth day, my phone rang. It was David. "Nathan, we need to talk," he said without preamble. My stomach dropped. "About what?" "About Mom and Dad's will. I know they told you." I pulled over to the side of the road I'd been driving to the office and put the car in park. "Yeah, they told me. Look, I know you're probably upset, but you have to understand their perspective. You've been drifting for years, Nate. You dropped out of school, you've jumped from job to job, you don't have any stability. They're worried about you. They want to make sure the money goes to someone who can actually manage it." The condescension in his voice made my teeth clench. "Is that what you think? That I can't manage money?" "I think you've never proven that you can. Look, I'm not trying to be harsh here, but facts are facts. You don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, you don't have any real responsibilities. Mom and Dad worked hard for what they have, and they want to see it go to someone who's built something real." "Something real," I repeated. "Like what you've built." "Yeah, actually. I've got a career, a family, assets. I've shown that I can handle financial responsibility. You've shown that you're good at running away from commitment." The old Nathan would have argued, would have tried to defend himself, to explain, to make him understand. But I wasn't the old Nathan anymore. "David, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When's the last time you actually asked me about my life? Not lectured me, not told me what you think I should be doing? Actually asked?" There was a pause. "I don't know what you mean." "I mean, when's the last time you asked me what I do for a living, where I work, what I'm working on? Have you ever asked those questions?" "You work in tech," he said defensively. "You've told me that." "That's like saying you work in finance. It's technically true, but completely meaningless. Do you know what I actually do?" "You do computer stuff, programming or whatever?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Programming or whatever? Right. Why are you being like this?" "I'm just trying to understand something, David. You and Mom and Dad have all decided that I'm a failure, that I haven't built anything real, that I can't handle responsibility. But none of you have ever bothered to find out what I actually do. You've just assumed." "Nate, if you were doing something impressive, don't you think you'd have told us?" And there it was. The fundamental assumption that underlay everything, that if I had anything worth celebrating, I would have shared it with them. That my silence was proof of failure, not a choice. "You know what, David? You're right. I should have told you." I could hear the relief in his voice. "Okay, good. I'm glad I should have told you that I earn more in a month than you make in a year. I should have told you that the algorithm I built last quarter generated more revenue than your entire division at Merrill Lynch will generate in the next decade. I should have told you that I own my apartment in San Francisco outright, that I drive a car that costs more than your annual salary, that I could buy Mom and Dad's house in Connecticut with cash and barely notice the expense." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "What?" "I should have told you that I'm a quantitative researcher at one of the most successful hedge funds in the world, that I have a PhD in mathematics from Stanford that I finished part-time while working, that I'm considered one of the leading experts in machine learning applications for financial modeling. I should have told you all of that, but I didn't, because every time I called home, you were all so certain I was a disappointment that it seemed easier to just let you think what you wanted to think." "Nathan, are you serious?" David's voice had changed completely. "Dead serious? Want to see my tax returns? I can send them over. Or maybe you'd like to talk to my boss. Richard Osman? He's pretty well known in finance circles. Maybe you've heard of him." This doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you tell us?" "Because you never asked, David. None of you ever asked. You just decided who I was and what I was worth, and you never questioned those assumptions. Not once. But Mom and Dad are about to. I know what they're about to do. And honestly, I'm tempted to let them do it. Let them give you everything. Let them cut me out. Let them spend the rest of their lives thinking I'm a failure. Because at least then, I'll know exactly where I stand." "Nate, wait. We need to talk about this. We need to tell them." "Why? So they can feel guilty? So they can apologize and rewrite the will and pretend like the last 30 years didn't happen? What's the point?" "The point is they deserve to know the truth." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Do they? They've spent my entire life deciding what truth they wanted to believe about me. Maybe this is just the natural conclusion of that." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building, watching the fog roll in off the bay, and felt something like clarity settling over me. David would tell them. Of course he would. He'd call them tonight, maybe tomorrow, and he'd tell them everything I'd said. And then they'd call me, confused and hurt and angry, and we'd have the conversation I'd been avoiding for years. Or maybe they wouldn't believe him. Maybe they'd think I was lying, exaggerating, making things up to make myself feel better. Maybe they'd convince themselves that whatever I was making, it couldn't possibly be as much as I claimed. People were good at that, at finding ways to preserve their existing beliefs in the face of contradictory evidence. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Nate, please call me back. We need to figure this out." I turned off my phone and went into the office. I had work to do, and unlike my family drama, my work was something I could actually control. For the next week, I heard nothing from my parents. David texted twice more, increasingly frantic messages about how we needed to talk, how this was serious, how I couldn't just drop a bomb like that and disappear. I didn't respond. Then, on Thursday afternoon, Gerald called. "Nathan, I think you should know. Your parents called me this morning. They want to move up the signing of the estate documents to next week." My heart sank. David told them, didn't he? I don't know what David told them, but your mother was very insistent that they needed to finalize everything as soon as possible. She said something about not wanting any more delays or complications. I closed my eyes. They don't believe him. Or they do believe him, and they're doubling down. Either way, you need to make a decision. Do you want me to stall them, or do you want to let this play out? I thought about my mother's voice on the phone, that rehearsed quality, the certainty that she was doing the right thing. I thought about my father's silence, the 6 months he hadn't spoken to me after I dropped out. I thought about David, agreeing that it was generous to leave me anything at all. And I thought about myself, sitting in the dark of my apartment, the glow of my monitors the only light, building something beautiful and complex and valuable that no one in my family would ever understand or appreciate. "Set up a meeting," I said. "All of us. You, me, my parents, David. Tell them it's about the estate planning. Tell them there are tax implications we need to discuss in person. Nathan, are you sure?" "I'm sure. It's time to stop hiding." Gerald scheduled the meeting for the following Monday at his office in Greenwich. I flew out Sunday night, checked into a hotel, and spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I was going to say. I'd prepared documentation, copies of my tax returns, my employment contract, my stock options, everything that proved I was who I said I was. I'd even brought a letter from Richard confirming my position and my compensation, written on official letterhead with his signature notarized. I wasn't going to let them dismiss this as exaggeration or lies. When I walked into Gerald's office Monday morning, my parents were already there, sitting side by side on a leather couch. My mother looked older than I remembered, her hair more gray, new lines around her eyes. My father looked the same, stern, formal, his suit pressed to perfection. David arrived 2 minutes after me, avoiding my eyes. Gerald gestured for us all to sit. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is unusual, but there are some matters we need to discuss before we finalize the estate planning documents." My mother spoke first. "Gerald, I don't understand why this couldn't be handled over the phone. We've been very clear about our wishes." "Mrs. Reeves, I understand that. But as I mentioned, there are some tax implications that require a more detailed discussion, and your son has raised some concerns that I think you need to hear." My mother's lips thinned. "Nathan has always had concerns. That doesn't mean they're valid." "Mom," I said quietly. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Fear. She was afraid of what I might say, afraid of what this meeting might mean. "Nathan, your father and I have made our decision. We understand you're upset, but—" "I'm not upset about the money," I interrupted. "I don't need your money. I don't want your money." "Then why are we here?" my father asked. His voice was cold, clipped. It was the voice he used in court, the one that said he'd already made up his mind and nothing I said would change it. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. "We're here because you're about to make a decision based on information that's fundamentally wrong. And before you do that, you deserve to know the truth." I slid the folder across the table to my mother. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the first page, my most recent tax return. I watched her face change, confusion giving way to shock. This can't be right," she said. "Nathan, what is this?" "That's my tax return from last year. The number at the bottom is what I earned. $2.3 million in salary and bonuses, another $900,000 in stock compensation. The year before that was $1.8 million. The year before that was $1.2 million. My father leaned over to look at the documents. His hand gripped the edge of the table. "This is fake," he said flatly. "It has to be." I pulled out another document. "This is a letter from my employer, Richard Osman, confirming my position as senior quantitative researcher at Osman Capital. My compensation package is detailed there. You can call him directly if you want. His number is at the bottom." My mother was still staring at the tax return. "I don't understand. You told us you worked in tech. You never mentioned any of this. You never asked, Mom. Not once in the last 7 years did you ask me specifically what I do or how much I make. You just assumed I was failing because I didn't follow the path you laid out for me." David cleared his throat. "Nate told me last week. I tried to tell you, but you didn't believe me." My father rounded on him. "You knew about this and didn't say anything?" "I just found out. And I did say something. You said Nathan was exaggerating. That he was just upset about the will and making things up to make himself feel important." The room fell silent. My mother closed the folder with shaking hands. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" It was the question I'd known was coming, but hearing it still made me angry. Why would I? Every time I came home, every time we talked, You made it clear what you thought of my choices. I dropped out of business school, so I was irresponsible. I moved to California, so I was running away. I worked in tech, so I wasn't serious. You'd already written the story of who I was, and nothing I said was going to change that narrative. That's not fair, my mother said, but her voice was weak. Isn't it? You literally just told me 3 weeks ago that you were cutting me out of your will because I hadn't established myself. You said David had proven he was financially responsible and I hadn't. You made that judgment without knowing anything about my actual financial situation. You didn't ask for my tax returns. You didn't ask about my career. You just decided? My father was reading through the documents now, his lawyer's brain working through the evidence. This says you have a PhD in mathematics. From Stanford. I finished it part-time while working. Took me 5 years. Why didn't you tell us you were in a PhD program? I did tell you. I mentioned it on a phone call about 4 years ago. You said it sounded like I was stalling on getting a real job, so I stopped mentioning it. My mother pressed her hands to her face. Oh, Nathan. I need you to understand something, I said, and my voice was steady now, clear. I didn't hide this from you because I was ashamed or because I wanted to punish you. I hid it because telling you felt pointless. You'd already decided I was a disappointment. You'd already decided that David was the success and I was the failure. Nothing I said was going to change that, so I stopped trying. But we would have, if we'd known. Would you have? I leaned forward. Because here's what I think would have happened. I would have told you about my job, my salary, my PhD, and you would have found new reasons to be disappointed. Maybe you'd say I work too much. Maybe you'd say I'm not using my degree properly. Maybe you'd criticize me for not being married, not having kids, not living the life you envisioned for me. The problem was never really about money or success. The problem is that I'm not David, and I never will be. The silence that followed was suffocating. David spoke first, his voice quiet. Nate, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have asked. Yes, you should have. You're my brother. You should have been curious about my life, about what I was doing, about whether I was happy. Instead, you decided I was directionless and supported cutting me out of the family money because I hadn't proven myself to your satisfaction. He flinched. I was wrong. Yeah, you were. My mother was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Nathan, I'm so sorry. We made a terrible mistake. We should have asked more questions. We should have been more interested. You should have treated me like a person whose life had value, even if it didn't look like the life you wanted for me, I said. You should have respected my choices, even if you didn't understand them. You should have given me the benefit of the doubt, instead of assuming the worst. My father set down the documents. What do you want from us, Nathan? It was a fair question. What did I want? An apology? I was getting that. The money? I'd already said I didn't want it. Their approval? It was 30 years too late for that. I want you to sign the documents as written, I said. Everyone stared at me. What? My mother gasped. You heard me. Give David the money. Give me the $50,000 trust. Do exactly what you plan to do. Nathan, that's insane, David said. Now that they know what? They'll rewrite the will? They'll split things evenly? They'll apologize and everything will be fine? I shook my head. That doesn't fix anything. That doesn't change the fact that they were willing to do this in the first place. It doesn't change the fact that they spent 3 decades deciding I wasn't good enough. But we were wrong, my mother said desperately. We know that now. We want to make it right. You can't make it right. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You can change the will, but you can't change the years of comparison and criticism and disappointment. You can't change the fact that you valued David's success over my happiness. You can't change the fact that when you thought I was struggling, you decided the solution was to cut me off rather than offer support. Gerald spoke up for the first time. Nathan, I understand you're hurt, but I don't think making a decision out of anger is wise. I'm not angry, Gerald. I'm done. I'm done trying to prove myself to people who don't value who I am. I'm done hoping that someday they'll see me clearly. I'm done letting their opinion of me matter. I stood up. Sign the documents. Cut me out. Give David everything. I don't need your money, and I don't need your approval. I needed those things when I was 25 and scared and trying to figure out who I was. But I'm 32 now, and I've built a life I'm proud of, and I don't need you to validate it. My mother stood too, reaching for my hand. Please, Nathan, don't do this. Let us fix our mistake. I looked at her hand, then at her face. The mistake wasn't the will, Mom. The mistake was 30 years of not seeing me, not really seeing me, and that's not something you can fix by changing a few legal documents. I picked up my briefcase. Gerald, thank you for setting this up. Send me whatever documents I need to sign for the trust. I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard my mother sobbing, my father saying my name in that stern voice that used to make me freeze in my tracks. David calling out, Nate, wait, please. But I didn't stop. I walked out of Gerald's office, down the stairs, out onto the street where the spring sun was shining and the air smelled like cut grass and possibility. My phone started ringing before I reached my car. I didn't answer it. I drove to the airport, returned my rental, and sat in the terminal waiting for my flight back to San Francisco. My phone kept buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails. I turned it off. On the plane, somewhere over Ohio, I finally let myself cry. Not for the money I'd rejected, not for the family I'd walked away from, but for the boy I used to be. The one who'd tried so hard to be what they wanted, who'd believed that if he just succeeded enough, tried hard enough, proved himself thoroughly enough, they'd finally see him as worthy. That boy was gone now. He'd been gone for a while, but I'd been holding on to the ghost of him, the possibility that maybe, someday, things could be different. Now I was letting him go. 3 months later, I got a letter from Gerald. The estate documents had been signed as written. David would inherit the bulk of the assets. I would receive $50,000 in a trust fund when my parents passed. There was a note attached in Gerald's handwriting. Your parents have tried to contact you 63 times since our meeting. David has tried 41 times. I'm not sure if you're reading these messages, but I wanted you to know that they're devastated. Your mother in particular. I also want you to know that I think what you did took extraordinary courage. Whatever happens next, I hope you find peace. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on my work. That quarter, the algorithm I'd been developing went live, and it performed even better than our projections. Richard gave me a bonus of $1.2 million and told me I was being promoted to Director of Quantitative Research. I bought a painting I'd been eyeing for months, an abstract piece by a Taiwanese artist, all bold colors and chaotic energy. I hung it in my living room where my monitors used to be. I started dating someone I met at a conference, a guy who worked in biotech and understood the weird hours and the obsessive focus that came with this kind of work. I joined a gym and started rock climbing. I adopted a cat from a shelter, a scraggly orange tabby who'd been there for 6 months because he was too independent and not affectionate enough. I named him Alan, after Alan Turing, and he slept on my chest every night, purring like an engine. I didn't call my family. I didn't respond to their messages. I didn't explain or justify or defend. I just lived my life, and slowly, the calls became less frequent. Once a week instead of once a day. Once a month instead of once a week. By the 6-month mark, they'd stopped entirely, except for a single text from my mother on my birthday. I love you. I'm sorry. Please call when you're ready. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready. Then, almost exactly 1 year after the meeting in Gerald's office, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Nathan Reeves? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who is this? My name is Dr. Lisa Park. I'm a cardiologist at Yale New Haven Hospital. Your father had a heart attack this morning. He's stable now, but he's asking for you. The world tilted. I'll be on the next flight, I said. I made it to the hospital by evening. My mother was in the waiting room, and when she saw me, she started crying all over again. Nathan, thank you for coming. Thank you. David was there too, looking exhausted. He stood when he saw me, but didn't try to hug me. He's in ICU. They're limiting visitors, but they said family can go in one at a time. How bad is it? I asked. Bad enough. He had a major blockage in his left anterior descending artery. They put in 2 stents. The doctor said if he'd waited another hour, David trailed off. I sat down in one of those uncomfortable hospital chairs. My mother sat next to me, not quite touching. I've wanted to call you every day, she said quietly. But I didn't know what to say. How to apologize for something so big. So why didn't you try? She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Because you asked us not to. You made it clear you were done, and I thought maybe the best thing I could do was respect that, even though it was killing me. We sat in silence for a while. Then a nurse came out. Family for William Reeves? My mother stood. That's us. He can have 1 visitor for 10 minutes. Who wants to go first? My mother and David both looked at me. You go, Mom, I said. She went in. David sat back down, leaving an empty chair between us. I've been going to therapy, he said after a while. What? Therapy. After that meeting, I realized I'd been complicit in something really cruel, and I needed to understand why. Why I was so quick to agree that you didn't deserve an equal share. Why I never questioned Mom and Dad's narrative about you. What did you figure out? He laughed, a hollow sound. That I was threatened by you. Even when I thought you were failing, I was threatened, because you'd done something I never could. You'd walked away from their expectations. You'd chosen your own path. And that terrified me because I've never done that. I've spent my entire life following the script they wrote. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not asking for forgiveness, David continued. I know I don't deserve it, but I needed you to know that I see what I did. I see how I failed you as a brother, and I'm working on being better. The nurse came back out. Next visitor? David went in. I sat alone in the waiting room, surrounded by the beep of monitors and the quiet conversations of other families in crisis. When David came back out, he looked shaken. He wants to see you, I walked down the hall, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum. My father looked small in the hospital bed, wires and tubes connecting him to machines. His skin was gray, his hair thinner than I remembered. "Nathan," he said when he saw me. His voice was weak. "Dad." I sat in the chair next to his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." He tried to smile. "The doctor says I'm lucky. If I'd been anywhere else when it happened. But I was in the office and my paralegal called 911 right away." "That's good." We were silent for a moment. Then he said, "I was wrong about you. Completely, fundamentally wrong. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I see that now." "Okay." I was so sure I knew what success looked like, what a good life looked like. And when you didn't fit that picture, I decided you were the problem instead of questioning whether my picture was wrong. His eyes filled with tears. "You're extraordinary, Nathan. What you've built, what you've accomplished. It's extraordinary. And I should have seen that years ago." I felt my throat tighten. "Why didn't you?" "Pride, I think. And fear. I was afraid that if I admitted you'd found your own way and it worked, then maybe my way wasn't the only right way. Maybe all the sacrifices I'd made, all the rules I'd followed, maybe they weren't as important as I'd told myself they were. It was easier to decide you were wrong than to question my entire worldview." He reached for my hand. I let him take it. "I'm sorry, Nathan. For all of it. For not asking questions. For not seeing you. For deciding who you were instead of letting you show me. I'm so sorry." I squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry, too. I should have told you the truth sooner. I was angry, and I let that anger keep me from being honest." "No," he said firmly. "Don't you dare apologize. You had every right to be angry. We gave you every reason to be angry. This is on us, not you." The monitor beeped steadily in the background. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I meant what I said that day. I don't want you to change the will. I don't want the money." He started to protest, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish. I don't want the money because I don't need it, and because I don't want our relationship, whatever it's going to be going forward, to be complicated by financial considerations. I want to rebuild something with you and Mom and David, but I want to do it on a clean slate. No guilt, no obligations, just family. Or at least, an attempt at family. Nathan, that's not fair to you. It's exactly fair to me. It's what I want. I'm not punishing you or proving a point. I'm choosing what feels right for me. Can you respect that?" He studied my face for a long moment. "You really have grown up. Somewhere along the way, when I wasn't paying attention, you became this incredibly strong, self-assured person. And I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you." I stayed with him for another few minutes, then went back to the waiting room. My mother looked up hopefully. "How is he?" "He's okay. Tired, but okay." "Nathan, can we talk? Really talk?" I nodded. We found a quiet corner of the waiting room. My mother twisted her hands together, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from her before. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "I don't know if I can fix this, but I want to try. I want to be your mother again, if you'll let me." "I don't know what that looks like," I admitted. "I don't either. But maybe we can figure it out together. Maybe we can start over, or start fresh, or... I don't know. I just know I can't lose you. Not completely. Not forever." I thought about the year I'd spent in silence, the peace I'd found in building a life that was entirely mine, answerable to no one. I thought about the calls I hadn't answered, the messages I'd deleted, the wall I'd built between myself and the people who'd hurt me. And I thought about my father in that hospital bed, tubes running in and out of him, saying he was proud of me. "I need boundaries," I said. "If we're going to have any kind of relationship, I need you to respect that my life is mine. My choices are mine. You can disagree with them, you can worry about me, but you can't try to control me or shame me or compare me to David. Can you do that?" "Yes," she said immediately. "Yes, I can do that. And I need you to ask questions. Real questions. About my work, my life, the things I care about. Not because you're looking for ammunition or because you're trying to fix me, but because you actually want to know who I am. I do want to know who you are. I've wanted to know for a long time, but I was too proud to admit I didn't." We sat there in the hospital waiting room, my mother and I, surrounded by the quiet chaos of other people's emergencies, and started the slow, difficult work of becoming strangers who were trying to know each other. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't even really an ending at all. It was just a beginning, tentative, uncertain, fragile as glass. But it was something. 6 months later, I flew to Connecticut for Thanksgiving. The first Thanksgiving in 7 years I'd spent with my family. My father was recovering well. He'd made changes, started exercising, changed his diet. He looked healthier than he had in years. David brought his wife and kids. My boyfriend Adrian came with me. Dinner was awkward at first. My mother tried too hard, asking too many questions about my work. My father kept apologizing for things that had happened years ago. David's kids were loud and chaotic and wonderful. But slowly, As the evening wore on, something shifted. My mother asked Adrian about his research, and they ended up talking for an hour about CRISPR gene editing. My father and I had a conversation about the mathematics behind options pricing, and for the first time, I saw him understand what I actually did. David pulled me aside at one point. "Thank you for coming. I know it's not easy." "It's getting easier," I said. And it was. Not easy, but easier. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom with Adrian asleep beside me, I checked my phone. There was an email from Gerald. "Nathan, I wanted you to know that your parents officially updated their will last month. Everything is split evenly between you and David. I know you said you didn't want them to change it, but they insisted. They said they'd rather do what's right than what's easy. I hope you're well. You deserve every good thing that comes your way." I read the email twice, then put my phone down. In the morning, I'd call my parents. I'd tell them I appreciated the gesture, even if I didn't need it. I'd tell them I loved them, something I hadn't said in years. But for now, I just lay there in the dark, listening to Adrian breathe, thinking about the long, strange journey that had brought me here. From the son who was never quite good enough, to the man who'd built something extraordinary in the shadows, to someone who was learning, slowly, painfully, how to let people see him clearly. They'd ask me, "Do they not know who you are?" The answer, for so long, had been no. They didn't know. They'd never known. But now they were trying. And that, I was learning, might be enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.